Hello and welcome back to Quick Shift TV. You join me for the first of 3 videos looking at different generation AMGs, and we're going to kick off with the lovely CLK55 AMG. Now, yes, I have had to be creative with my microphone placement. I didn't think it through. This t-shirt is not conducive to the usual lapel positioning, but hopefully it will work out okay. Now, I have to admit, I didn't know much about the CLK. If I saw one of these in my rearview mirror, I would have thought it was the E-Class. Actually, a lot of the styling was taken from the higher tiers of the E-Class series, but the bits that matter, the guts, the underpinnings of the car, were based on the much more modern, more nimble and agile C-Class, and that definitely translates when you are behind the wheel. Let's take a closer look at some of the details on the car. The CLK has everything that you'd expect from a luxury saloon of this era to rival its German competitors. Now, from between 1997 and 2010, there is a whole Wikipedia page of different revisions, facelifts and enhancements. In terms of engines, think of a number between 2 and 5.4, and you can probably have an engine in that displacement, going from a 4-cylinder right up to the more juicy V6s and the V8, which is found in the AMG. So let's have a look at some of the important parts that AMG have uprated. Now, it is worth mentioning that the owner has put on these lovely Carlson wheels, which really do enhance the styling to make it look a little bit more aggressive, but are still in fitting with the kind of AMG philosophy. But from factory, it will have come with the standard AMG slightly smaller wheels. Now, in terms of what AMG have done to the car to enhance it and basically deserve that AMG on the back. First of all, the suspension. So uprated suspension, unique to the AMG line. Revised damper rates along with other parameters to make it a little bit more sportier and deal with the weight of the car. Actually driving it, it doesn't feel too cumbersome, but actually with me and a little bit of fuel in it, oil if you want some of that in the engine as well, you are looking over 2 tons. So it's not a light car, but it deals with it very well. AMG brakes, these are really good. I'll talk a bit about those in more depth later, but the AMG brakes are a big revision for this car with much larger steel discs. I also like the side skirts on these, again very in keeping with AMG, not too in your face, still subtle, but make the car look like it's sitting a lot lower, complementing the slightly lower suspension for the AMG and giving the car an all-round very sleek look. At the back of the car, there's not actually much to give away the uniqueness of the vehicle. Yes, we've got the model denotation and the AMG badge, which goes nicely with the dual exit exhaust, but there's not a lot that is going to get you the wrong sort of attention on the road. So the CLK is legitimately falling into that sleeper category. Now, the boot is not a bad size at all, nice and wide for those larger suitcases, brilliant for getting all my filming gear in this morning, but it might be slightly shallower than some potential buyers might imagine, so make sure you check it out in person when you actually go and have a look at one of these cars. But overall capacity is not bad. Let's go and have a look at the interior. So the cabin is largely what you'd expect, certainly if you've had this era of Mercedes before. AMG haven't done much to the inside of the car to make it particularly special, but it's still a perfectly pleasant place to be. There's a few odd sort of dash trims that I personally wouldn't have spec'd from the factory, but I'm sure the owner, the first owner, absolutely loved it and it was personalised to him, which is what cars are all about, isn't it? But it isn't what I'd choose. However, seats are really comfy, nicely bolstered, certainly remind me of the sort of seats you'd get in the 5 Series, certainly again rivaling Audi and BMW for comfort, creature comforts for this generation of car. Should we get on and drive it then? Let's go! So, as we get underway, how does she feel jumping in? Well, I collected the car from the owner, James, yesterday evening. Thank you very much to James for lending me your pride and joy. And I had about a 45-minute journey home in the damp just to get to know the car. Jumping in, it wasn't intimidating to drive. There's a few things that you do notice if you're not used to this era of cars. A big one for me, there's a little bit of slack in the accelerator pedal. Now, I've been told that this is common amongst all these cars, but there's a bit of dead travel that you've just got to take up with your foot, and it's probably only about 2 or 3 centimeters, but through your leg it translates to quite a large movement. So it's just one of those things you've got to get used to. So you press the accelerator and there's a little bit of travel before the car will actually move off. The biggest impact on driving is when you are coming out of a corner and you've perhaps come off the power, applied the brakes, and then as you come out the apex you want to get back onto the power. Again, you've got to take up that slack, so the power doesn't come in exactly when you're expecting it. However, I would imagine my brain will rewire to the characteristics of the acceleration fairly quickly, so it's not a big issue for me. Brakes, I really like the brakes in this. It's a much more analog feel. I went go-karting with my colleagues recently, and the brake feel in this really is reminiscent of a go-kart, but it gives you loads of modulation. You know exactly how much bite you are getting and which wheels have got grip, and exactly what is happening underneath you, which is a really refreshing change, and is something people are going to start harking back to in comparison to the much more electronic, overly modulated brakes that we've all got used to in modern cars. ABS on these cars is standard, and the ventilated discs from AMG don't seem to get hot particularly quickly and are performing really well for faster road use. Now, the owner of this car has recently taken it through a full health service, so it's got a full bill of health. Now, I only knew James through him commenting on the video, so it's absolutely brilliant for him to let me take his car out without actually knowing me very well, but wanting to support the channel basically and liking the videos that I'm creating. When we started communicating about the car, he said he'd got some sort of older winter tyres on it, and I sort of subtly hinted that he maybe should upgrade them, and he was looking to anyway, and he'd seen that I really like the Michelin Pilot Sports, so that's what he went for. He said, right, you can't have it for another week, I'm going to put 4 brand new Michelin Pilot Sports on it, which he's done. He's really pleased with them. He's done a few miles in them, and the transformation is night or day. I keep stressing it. Tyres, only thing in contact with the road, roughly the surface area of an iPhone on each corner of the car in contact with the road, so it doesn't matter what you do to the rest of the car. So make sure you've got a pair of shoes that balance that wet weather performance, resisting aquaplaning, etc., and the outright dry grip that is the Michelin Pilot Sports party piece. He's also put on some EBC yellow stuff pads. Now, in addition to just giving you guys a look around such a cool car, I'd really like to achieve 2 things with this video. First of all, ask the question, does it strike that balance between comfort and everyday drivability with the performance that the AMG variant gives you? And also the second part is actually ask, are cars like this going to start appreciating? I've had a look at prices and they are beginning to rise for the CLK. It's not a big rise, but the general trend over the last couple of years, and that's resisting any price falls during lockdown, etc. The CLK price is increasing, albeit slowly. People in the car community are starting to say anything with an AMG badge over the next few years is going to become more sought after and begin to go up in price. So my gut reaction is this isn't going to be an incredibly lucrative investment, but you're going to get a lot of enjoyment for your money, what these are going for, and probably not lose anything. If anything, make a little bit back, make a small return when you come to sell the car if you're holding on to it for a couple of years. The cockpit does give you plenty of space and is very comfortable for longer journeys. The dash on these is quite sort of receded compared to modern cars. It doesn't extend too far, so it does feel nice and spacious. Now, one thing I am pleasantly surprised by is how happy the big old V8 is at lower speeds. It's not goading me to exceed the speed limit, and sits really comfortable in the 30 zones. Now, gear changes are nice and smooth, as you'd expect for a luxury saloon. However, you have got sort of a manual override with the gear selector. If you tap it to the left, it then displays what gear you're in. So I'm in 4th gear, and I can change down into 3rd, and the speed I'm at now, 2nd is appropriate. It takes a few seconds just to change down. It's not like a modern auto box. However, it will stay in 2nd now as the revs are rising, and as I get on the accelerator, change gear by hitting it to the right, the car makes really good progress. Do not underestimate this car. The rear end will bite, however, again in 3rd gear, 3000 RPM, roll onto the throttle, and then by 4 you really are having to think about the road ahead of you, because the horizon begins to hurtle towards you, so you've really got to be on it. So the gearbox is not going to stand up well to modern auto boxes. I would definitely say, as you begin to push on with this car and you become more comfortable, and it is a car you've got to get to know, as you become more comfortable with it, it kind of comes out of its shell. It performs better and better the more you press on. Plenty of torque, absolutely, and then I'm choosing to change around 4,500 RPM due to the nature of the engine, the displacement, the driving characteristics. I'm not wanting to rag it to its red line, which is 6,000 RPM. Around 4.5, I'm thinking I may as well change, as I'm not going to get much more out of that gear. Again, if you saw one of these on the road, you're probably going to think it is a diesel E-Class or C-Class, but actually it's got some real go and some serious overtaking power. The suspension is on the firm side, but that's what we would expect from an AMG, and what that means is it deals with, and I might go as far to say it hides, the weight of the CLK, so it gives you confidence going into those sharper bends. Having said that, the cockpit overall is quite well insulated. It's quite nice and peaceful in here. Feedback and harshness through the tyres is very minimal. The one sticking point would be wind noise around the windows. It is clear that the seal around the doors is not absolutely brilliant. I did actually wash this car for James this morning just to do the car justice, and I did notice a little bit of water on the door cards where obviously the water had come through. I think with rain it wouldn't be a problem, but if you're going to have a look at one of these, I would make sure that the rubber hasn't perished too much around the doors, and it creates a nice seal. Otherwise you will get a lot of kind of wind noise coming through as it buffers through the windows. So there is an abundance of torque from a stop there. The traction control light does come on if you are giving it the beans from 1st gear, but unlike the more modern AMGs, the light is not flashing all the time. It doesn't seem like the traction control is too invasive. The AMG does get an uprated gearbox, but there was no thought process from the factory that the drivers would be, certainly for the most part, changing gear themselves. So compared to a modern vehicle, yes, the gear change is slow, but actually when you progress through and you're getting up to 4,000 or 5,000 RPM, the gear change is not too bad. So just to run through a few boring bits, we have got fully adjustable electric seats, electric folding wing mirrors, electric windows, the heated element on the rear windshield and the demisters, they all work really well. I know these are boring points to make, but in terms of ownership, actually, do I want a car of that age every day in the winter, etc.? These are important points, and again, it does all stack up quite well. The buttons on the dash and centre console are quite large, kind of retro style buttons, but again, it's in keeping with the character of the car, so it all comes together quite nicely. I mentioned these lovely comfy leather seats. The leather has bared quite well. There's not too much wear and tear on these. The bolsters is often what goes, and that's still really nice and firm. James has opted to have his calipers repainted in red, but other than a few rust bubbles, the paint is faring well for its age. Other things to check, well, on this, the fuel pump, steering wheel dampener and prop shaft donuts have been replaced. Always advisable to have a look under the car, as they are prone to rust due to their age, and the owner may or may not have had it underbody seal. So all that is left to say as this lovely day turns to a gorgeous evening is thank you very much to James for getting me into such a nice example of the CLK to show my subscribers. Make sure you're on the list of those people so you are notified when the next 2 AMG videos come out, starting with a subtly modified C63, which should be a lot of fun. Thank you very much for joining me. Hope this video has been entertaining and or insightful, and I will catch you in the next one. Take care, take it easy, see you later folks.